Welcome to the Twin Labs podcast, where we help you make better decisions using AI and digital twins. Today, we are doing a deep dive into, well, one of the most transformative policy frameworks to come out in the last few decades, nudge theory.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. It was formalized by the economist Richard Thaler and legal scholar Cass Sunstein, and it has just fundamentally changed how governments, businesses, you name it, think about behavioral change.
On a massive scale.
Exactly. So our mission today is to get past the buzzword, what nudge actually means. We want to unpack the psychology behind it, the political philosophy holding it all together, and really, for our listeners, the decision makers.
The hard evidence.
The hard, quantifiable evidence of its impact and where it's all heading with what people are calling Nudge 2.0.
And what makes this so critical to talk about is the paradigm shift it created. It's not just some small adjustment to an old theory.
No, it was a fundamental break.
Absolutely. For decades, classical economic models were built on this idea of a perfectly rational person. They called it Homo economicus.
Right, the econ.
The econ.
Yeah.
And Thaler and Sunstein, they didn't just tweak that model. They basically tore it up. They brought actual real-world psychology into economic analysis. So we moved from studying this perfect theoretical econ to understanding the messy, flawed, but predictable human.
And that's the key word, isn't it? Predictable.
That's everything. The core insight is that because we are predictably flawed, we can use these small, non-coercive changes to the environment, what they call choice architecture, to steer people.
To steer them toward better outcomes?
Outcomes that they themselves would agree are better for them in the long run.
So that move from econ to human, that really sets the stage for the two big ideas we have to get our heads around today. First is the practical tool. Choice architecture. This idea that you have to acknowledge that choices are always presented in some context, so you might as well design that context intentionally instead of just letting it happen by chance.
And the second part is the philosophy, the ethical guardrails.
Libertarian paternalism. We'll definitely have to unpack that name.
We will. And for you, the decision maker listening to this, understanding that this framework it's just not optional anymore. It's vital.
Why so vital?
Because when these behavioral interventions are deployed correctly, and this is the crucial part, when they're rigorously tested, they give you this incredible strategic value.
You're talking about a better return on investment.
A massively better return. These are low-cost tools that have a huge impact compared to, sweeping new regulations or new taxes or these incredibly expensive programs. It's about leveraging human psychology to optimize outcomes, which is, that's the core job of a modern leader.
And that efficiency, that reliance on data to get results.
Well, that's exactly the kind of high-leverage optimization we champion at Twin Labs.
Okay, let's dig into that foundational idea that started it all, this shift away from Homo economicus. Before all this, how did economists see this, this econ?
Well, like we said, the econ wasn't really a person. It was more of a mathematical abstraction.
A tool for their models.
Exactly. A neat, clean variable. This ideal being was assumed to have perfect information, be totally free of emotional biases, and have just this flawless, ironclad self-control.
That was nice.
It would be, but it's not real. It was useful for building models, but, you just have to walk into a supermarket and see someone buying junk food when they're on a diet to see the flaw in the assumption.
Or try to stick to a New Year's resolution past January.
Right. So behavioral economics, with Thaler at the forefront, basically said, we need to stop modeling robots and start modeling real people. We need to model humans.
And what's the core difference then? What makes a human in this context?
The difference is that humans are systematically, predictably flawed. It's not random. We have cognitive limits. Our ability to process information is, it's bounded.
We get overwhelmed.
We do. And we care about things like fairness. We'll often turn down a deal that's financially good for us if we think the other person is being unfair. An econ would never do that.
And the biggest one.
Self-control. We are just constantly at war with ourselves, making choices today that our future selves will absolutely regret, and recognizing that we deviate from that rational model in these predictable ways. That's what opened the door for the whole nudge framework.
And this wasn't just some fringe academic idea.
Not at all. It was formally validated, of course, when Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize in Economics back in 2017. The citation was specifically for his contributions to behavioral economics that really cemented the bridge between economics and psychology.
So to really get how nudges work, we have to understand the wiring of this human brain. It often gets boiled down to Daniel Kahneman's work, right? The two systems of thinking.
Indeed. We call them the automatic system, or system 1, and the reflective system, system 2.
System 1 is what? Our gut reaction.
Pretty much. It's fast, intuitive, effortless. It's the part of your brain that recognizes a friend's face in a crowd or makes you duck when a ball is thrown at you. It works on these mental shortcuts, heuristics, and while it's super efficient, it is very, very susceptible to biases.
It cuts corners.
It has to be that fast.
So if System 1 is the fast-acting, corner-cutting part, then System 2 must be the slow, careful analyst.
That's a great way to think about it. System 2 is slow, deliberate, computational. It's what you use when you're solving a complex math problem or deciding which mortgage to take out. It's great at weighing trade-offs.
But it has a flaw.
It has a huge flaw. It's lazy.
Lazy.
It's lazy because using it takes real mental energy.
Right.
It's computationally expensive. So whenever it can, when it's faced with too much information or it's just tired, the reflective system basically says, I'm out. And it hands control back over to System 1.
And that's where the mistakes happen.
That's where the predictable mistakes happen. And those mistakes are the raw material that a choice architect works with.
Okay, so let's get into those predictable errors, these biases. I want to move past the textbook definitions and think about how they show up in a real-world, high-stakes environment.
Let's do it. A great one to start with is the availability heuristic.
The idea that if we can think of it easily, we assume it's common.
Exactly. Now, think about that in a corporate risk management setting. Let's say a company suffers a really high-profile, dramatic cyber attack. It's all over the news.
Okay.
For the next year, that company will pour a disproportionate amount of money and resources into preventing that exact kind of spectacular failure from happening again.
Even if it's not the biggest actual risk.
Even if the objective data shows that the much bigger, more frequent risk is something boring, like supply chain hiccups or administrative errors.
Right.
But that dramatic event is so available in everyone's memory that it completely distorts their risk assessment.
So they're funding the fear, not the actual probability.
Precisely. It leads to a massive misallocation of resources.
What about seeing patterns where there aren't any?
That's the representativeness heuristic. We judge the probability of something based on how much it resembles a pattern we think we see.
The classic is the basketball player on a hot streak.
Right. But in policy, this is huge. Imagine a new social program works brilliantly in a small, tight-knit town. The decision makers might then confidently roll it out in a giant, sprawling, diverse city because the core idea feels similar.
They're ignoring all the other variables.
They're completely ignoring the massive structural differences. They're judging the new situation by its resemblance to the old one, even when the underlying data suggests it probably won't work. It's a recipe for policy failure.
And then there's just the power of doing nothing.
The status quo bias. It's incredibly powerful, and it's coupled with simple inertia. People just resist change, even when a change would be really good for them.
We see this in companies all the time.
All the time. Think about trying to get an organization to adopt a new software system. The resistance isn't always about the new technology being bad. It's about the sheer mental effort required to change habits and update how you do things. We are just biologically wired to take the path of least resistance.
And tied into that is how we feel about losing versus gaining.
Yes, loss aversion. This is a huge one from prospect theory. The data shows people feel the pain of a loss about 2 to 2.5 times more strongly than the pleasure of an equivalent gain.
So losing $100 hurts more than twice as much as finding $100 feels good.
Exactly, and that skews all kinds of strategic decisions. In a negotiation, for instance, framing a pay cut as a $1,000 loss is a much more powerful motivator than framing a potential bonus as a $1,000 gain.
And for investors.
Oh, it explains why people hold on to losing stocks for way too long. They're trying to avoid the psychological pain of realizing the loss, so they end up risking even more money.
We also get stuck on the first number we hear.
That's anchoring. We over-rely on the first piece of information we get. It becomes the anchor for everything that follows.
This is huge in business negotiations.
Absolutely huge. The person who makes the first offer, even if it's completely outrageous, sets the entire range for the discussion. The final price almost always ends up closer to that initial anchor than it would have otherwise. A good negotiator knows that throwing out the first number is a powerful way to hijack the other person's System 1.
And lastly, the strange way we treat money differently depending on where it comes from.
That's mental accounting. It's a core part of bounded rationality. We put our money into these little imaginary buckets in our heads.
And the bucket determines how we spend it.
Totally. Think about a big company. A department might fight tooth and nail against spending $5,000 from its capital expenditure budget on a new tool that would make them more efficient. But they'll happily approve a $5,000 team dinner if it comes out of the morale and entertainment budget. The amount of money is identical, but the mental account it's drawn from completely changes how they perceive its value. All of these biases are the predictable flaws that choice architects can work with.
Okay, so we've established the problem. Humans make these systematic, predictable mistakes.
Yeah.
Now we get to the solution. The nudge. The definition here seems really, really important. It draws a very clear line.
It's critical. Anyone who designs policy or, a customer journey needs to have this tattooed on their brain. A nudge is any aspect of the choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding any options or significantly changing their economic incentives.
So that without forbidding any options part is the core of it.
It is. The intervention has to be easy and cheap to avoid.
Right.
The second you use coercion or a big financial penalty, you're not nudging anymore, you're just regulating.
Give me an example.
Okay, if a city puts big, brightly colored recycling bins right next to every trash can, that's a nudge. They're making recycling the easy option. But if they fine you $50 for not recycling, that is a mandate, not a nudge.
Or in a company setting.
If human resources automatically enrolls a new employee in the 401k plan but gives them a really simple one-click way to opt out, that's a classic default nudge.
Yeah.
But if the government mandates that every citizen has to contribute to a state pension fund,
That's a mandate.
right, the freedom to choose has been removed.
This brings us to that name you mentioned, the philosophy behind it all. Libertarian paternalism. Okay. To most people, those two words are flat-out contradiction.
They seem to be.
So how did Thaler and Sunstein manage to stitch those two ideas together?
This is really the political genius of the whole thing. They created this ethical scaffolding that allows for these low-cost interventions to happen. It lets institutions do things that help people without getting bogged down in the massive political fights that always come with, say, tax hikes or outright bans.
So let's break it down, the libertarian part first.
The libertarian aspect is non-negotiable. It means you are always preserving the individual's freedom of choice. People have to be free to choose. You must be able to opt out of the nudge, and it has to be easy.
No hidden fees or 20-step processes to cancel.
Exactly. The choice architect can't build fences around options. If you want to take the path that's, objectively worse for you, you have to be allowed to do it.
Okay, so that's the freedom part. Now, the paternalistic part, that's the one that makes people nervous.
It is. The paternalistic aspect simply argues that it's legitimate for institutions, governments, companies, designers to try and influence our behavior toward outcomes that will make our lives longer, healthier, and better.
But who decides what's better?
That's the key, as defined by the choosers themselves. The goal isn't to impose a new set of values on people. It's to help them achieve the goals they already have.
I have to push back a little, though. If the nudge works by targeting our automatic non-rational system one, how do we stop this paternalism from just becoming straight-up manipulation?
That is the ethical tightrope. You're absolutely right. And it's why transparency is so important. The nudge shouldn't be a secret, even if it's subtle. The point isn't to trick people. The point is to recognize that a choice environment has to exist. There is no such thing as a neutral design.
Right. The choices have to be presented somehow.
Exactly. So since you have to design it one way or another, you should design it in a way that helps people achieve their own long-term goals. The golden rule of libertarian paternalism is to offer nudges that are most likely to help and least likely to inflict harm.
So the default option should be what most people would choose anyway if they had all the time and information in the world.
That's it, precisely.
Okay, that clarifies the ethical side. So on the practical side, when do we need these nudges the most? When is our lazy system 2 most likely to just check out?
We can point to 3 specific situations where choice architecture is most needed and most effective. First, for decisions that are both difficult and rare.
Like choosing a mortgage.
A mortgage, a health insurance plan, a college major. These are huge, life-altering decisions, but we only make them a few times in our lives, so we never get good at them. The complexity is overwhelming, so we fall back on simple, often bad shortcuts.
Okay, difficult and rare. What's the second condition?
The second is for decisions that lack prompt feedback.
The classic example being saving for retirement.
Exactly. The action saving $100 today feels like an immediate loss. But the reward being financially secure in 40 years is so far away it feels abstract. It doesn't motivate System 1 at all.
Whereas eating a donut gives you immediate pleasure.
Right, and the negative health consequences are way down the road. System 1 lives in the here and now, so that delay in feedback makes it really easy for our present self to sabotage our future self. Nudges help bridge that time gap.
And the third situation.
Situations that are hard to translate. When you're faced with abstract or numerical choices, like trying to compare 3 different health insurance plans with different premiums, deductibles, and copays.
Your brain just shuts down.
It's a huge cognitive load.
Yeah.
You can't easily map the numbers to a real-life outcome. A good nudge simplifies that, making the link between your choice and what will actually happen to you feel immediate and intuitive.
So if you're a decision maker, the goal is to design the environment to make the best choice the easiest choice. And Thaler and Sunstein gave us a blueprint for this, right? The mnemonic NDGES.
Yes, this is the practical core of choice architecture. It's a checklist for how to design better systems.
Let's run through it. The I is for incentives.
Right, so while nudges don't significantly change economic incentives, you still have to make sure the basic costs and benefits line up. If you're trying to nudge people to do something that is fundamentally against their financial interest, it's just not going to work.
Okay, makes sense. U is for understand mappings.
This one is huge. It's about tackling that hard-to-translate problem we just talked about. You have to make the connection between the choice and the outcome crystal clear.
So instead of telling me my energy plan will save X kilowatt hours.
You map it to something I can actually understand.
Yeah.
This plan saves enough energy to power your TV for a whole year. It makes the benefit tangible.
Right. Then we get to D, for defaults. This feels like the most powerful one.
Oh, it is. It's the superstar of the toolkit.
Right.
This directly leverages that status quo bias and inertia we talked about earlier by making the best choice the default, like auto-enrolling people in a retirement plan. You use the laziness of System 2 to achieve a massive positive outcome.
Okay, G is give feedback.
This is how you solve the problem of delayed consequences. A well-designed system gives you immediate feedback. Think of those speed signs on the side of the road that flash your speed at you if you're going too fast.
That's a nudge.
A perfect real-time nudge. It gives you instant feedback that helps you correct your behavior.
E is for expect error.
This is about designing systems with the knowledge that humans will mess up. It's about building in forgiveness. When your software asks, "Are you sure you want to delete this file?" That's a nudge designed to prevent a common error.
And finally, S for structure complex choices.
Right. When people are faced with hundreds of options, like choosing a mutual fund, they get paralyzed. Good choice architecture doesn't take away the options, but it structures them. It uses filters or categories or recommended for you to make the decision manageable. It helps you navigate the complexity.
So it's clear the theory is powerful,
Mm-hmm.
but its real success is that it jumped from the pages of a book into reality. This became a blueprint for governance all over the world.
It happened incredibly fast. The UK's Behavioral Insights team, which everyone just calls the Nudge Unit, was set up in 2010. They were the pioneers. They took these academic principles and applied them directly to public policy.
And crucially, they tested everything.
That was the key. They committed to rigorous testing from day one. And that's what showed everyone that this wasn't just an interesting idea. It was scalable, it was effective, and it was incredibly cost-effective.
And the U.S. wasn't far behind.
Not at all. The idea got a huge boost when President Obama signed an executive order in 2015 that basically mandated federal agencies to use behavioral science insights to better serve the American people. That really cemented it as a serious tool of government.
And since then, it's just exploded.
It really has. Today, you can find over 400 dedicated nudge units or similar behavioral science groups all around the world. In Germany, Japan, Australia, not to mention international bodies like the World Bank and the European Commission. It's become a standard part of the modern policy toolkit.
You mentioned that the way these units are structured has changed over time.
It has. In the beginning, they had to be centralized. The first teams were right there in the Prime Minister's office or the White House.
Why was that so important?
To get political buy-in, to show it had the backing of the person at the very top. It helped them cut through all the bureaucracy and demonstrate some quick, high-profile wins.
But that's not the model anymore.
No, the field is maturing into what we call Nudge 2.0 readiness. And that requires decentralization. You need to embed the experts inside the specific government departments.
Because they have the domain expertise.
Exactly. The behavioral scientists need to work alongside the experts in health or transport or education to design really smart, context-specific policies. A central team just can't have that deep level of knowledge about every single area.
Let's talk about the impact, because that's what really matters.
Yeah.
Where have we seen the biggest, most quantifiable results?
The poster child for nudging is, and probably always will be, retirement savings. It's all about the power of the default effect.
Moving from an opt-in system to an opt-out system.
Yes. For decades, you had to actively choose to join your company's retirement plan. And because of status quo bias, most people just didn't. They never got around to it.
So the default was not saving.
Right. By simply flipping the default to automatic enrollment, where you're in the plan unless you actively choose to opt out, the results have been staggering. In the UK, that single policy change led to 10 million more people saving for their pensions.
Wow. And in public health.
In health, a lot of the focus is on reducing friction. Just simplifying the language on an insurance enrollment form or sending people a personalized text message reminder can dramatically increase the number of people who sign up for coverage, especially in hard-to-reach communities.
And what about in our daily environment?
We're seeing it there, too.
Yeah.
Simple changes like making sure healthy food options in a cafeteria are placed at eye level and are well lit have been shown to increase healthy eating by about 15%. It's a measurable change without banning anything.
The UK's Behavioral Insights team is famous for its early trials. Can you share a couple of their big financial wins?
Absolutely. Their work on tax compliance is a classic. They started adding a single line to the letters they sent to people who were late on their taxes.
What was the line?
It was a social norm prompt, something like, most people in your neighborhood pay their tax on time.
And that worked.
It worked incredibly well. In the early trials, they estimated that simple line brought forward about $300 million in tax payments, a huge return for just changing one sentence on a letter.
That's amazing.
Another big one was helping people find jobs. They used something called an implementation intention. They simply prompted job seekers to write down exactly what they were going to do to find a job and when and how they were going to do it.
Making a concrete plan.
Exactly. That small intervention was estimated to save the government between $75 and $150 million a year in welfare payments because it helped people get back to work faster.
These results really underscore the need for rigorous, evidence-based methods. You can't just guess. You have to test.
You have to. And this is why the expertise of an organization like Twin Labs is so critical. The whole foundation is built on rigorous methodology and data-driven insights. But, implementing that kind of rigor in the real world, in a big government agency, has its own challenges.
What are the biggest hurdles?
Well, first, just getting political and ethical clearance to run a real experiment. A randomized controlled trial, an RCT, is the gold standard. But that means randomly assigning one group of people to get no help, or a worse version of the help.
The politicians don't like that.
They hate it. It's a tough sell to say, we're going to deliberately not help some of your constituents for the sake of science. So they often just want to roll out a policy to everyone, even if it hasn't been properly tested.
What else?
Measurement is also really hard. A lot of the outcomes you care about, like improving long-term health, are slow to show up. So you have to rely on proxy metrics, which aren't always perfect. And then there's the problem of scaling up. A nudge that works in a small trial in one city might completely fail when you try to apply it to an entire country.
So how do you get around that? When a perfect experiment isn't possible?
You have to be flexible with your methods. Teams now rely a lot more on what we call quasi-experimental designs. These are statistical techniques that let you estimate a causal effect with a high degree of confidence, even when you can't do perfect randomization.
But the core lesson remains.
The core lesson is that the value of these interventions is zero if you can't prove they work. Without rigorous testing and scholarship, your policy is just a hunch. And that's why methodological excellence is the absolute bedrock of this entire field.
The framework has definitely not been standing still.
Yeah.
A huge update came in the 2021 final edition of the book, where they introduced this really important counter-concept, sludge.
Yes, sludge. It's the perfect name for it. It's the operational opposite of a nudge. If the core idea of nudging is make it easy, sludge is everything that makes a task difficult, tedious, and frustrating.
So, bureaucratic red tape.
Exactly. Administrative friction, ridiculously long forms, confusing procedures, anything that gets in the way of you accessing a benefit or exercising a right.
I think we've all experienced this. Trying to cancel a gym membership or a subscription, and they send you through this endless maze of web pages and phone calls.
That is a perfect example of corporate sludge. It's designed to make you give up. Other examples are rebate forms that are so complicated no one bothers to fill them out, or the sheer complexity of the U.S. tax code.
And what's so important about giving this a name?
Because it shifts the focus of who's to blame. The original nudge theory was mostly about the individual's cognitive flaws. Sludge forces us to look at the institution's role in creating these barriers, whether it's intentional or not.
And this is a huge issue when it comes to fairness and equity.
It's a massive equity issue. Sludge imposes huge costs in time and mental energy. And who does that hurt the most? The people who have the least time and energy to spare. People who are already stressed or lack resources. Sludge is an engine of inequality.
So what's the solution? How do you fight sludge?
The solution is the sludge audit. It's a systematic process where an organization has to go through and identify every point of friction, quantify its cost, and then get rid of it.
Then does it work?
The results can be incredible. There was a case where a U.S. agency simplified a really complicated form for a tax rebate. The redemption rate shot up to about 54%. It unlocked millions of dollars for low-income families who just couldn't navigate the old system.
So sometimes the best intervention is just removing the barrier.
It often is, and it's a principle we emphasize constantly at Twin Labs when we're helping clients streamline their processes.
Okay, so beyond fighting sludge, the field is moving into what people are calling Nudge 2.0. How is that different from the first wave of nudges?
Nudge 2.0 is all about being more sophisticated, more integrated, and most importantly, more dynamic.
What do you mean by dynamic?
The first generation nudges were mostly static, the same default for everyone. Nudge 2.0 uses real-time data and context to deliver personalized interventions. It looks at your immediate situation, the time of day, your recent behavior, and tailors the nudge specifically for you.
Can you give me a concrete example?
Sure, think about a bank. A Nudge 1.0 approach might be sending everyone an annual email reminder to save more.
Okay, pretty generic.
Right. A Nudge 2.0 system is much smarter. Let's say you log into your banking app late at night and your balance is low. The system recognizes that this might be a moment of financial stress.
So it might offer help.
Exactly. It might dynamically prompt you with an option for emergency support or a short-term loan. But if you check that same low balance in the middle of the day, it might infer you're just doing routine banking and instead offer a personalized savings tip based on your recent spending. The intervention adapts to your context.
Nudge 2.0 also seems to be about integrating with those traditional harder policy tools.
It is. It's about making those tools smarter and fairer. A brilliant example is the UK sugar levy. On the surface, it was a tax-a-hard lever, but it was designed behaviorally.
How so?
The main goal wasn't actually to make consumers pay more for sugary drinks. The goal was to nudge the companies to reformulate their products to get them below the tax threshold. It used loss aversion at the corporate level, and it worked. Public health improved without most people even noticing a change.
There's also the idea of auto-escalating pension contributions.
Yes, another really clever piece of choice architecture. This is a system that automatically increases your pension contribution rate over time, but, and this is the genius part, it times the increase to coincide with your annual pay raise.
So you never actually see your take-home pay go down.
You never feel the loss. It completely sidesteps loss aversion. You're saving more for your future, but without feeling the immediate psychological pain. It's incredibly effective.
This all leads directly to the cutting edge, where Nudge 2.0 meets advanced technology like AI.
This is where things get really powerful and really interesting for decision makers. We call it algorithmic nudging.
Okay, what is that?
It's where you use AI and machine learning, looking at huge amounts of personalized data, your clicks, your purchases, your location, to subtly alter the choice environment in real time at a massive scale. It can tailor the message, the timing, everything instantly to your specific psychological profile.
So that dynamic intervention we talked about, but supercharged.
Supercharged and automated. The ability to use data and analytics to drive optimal outcomes in real time. Well, that's precisely why decision makers need sophisticated partners and tools. This capability to design and deploy these dynamic, context-aware systems is absolutely central to the value that Twin Labs provides.
Of course, with all this success and sophistication comes more scrutiny. Let's talk about the critiques. The biggest ethical one seems to be that if nudges work by targeting our non-rational system 1, isn't that just manipulation?
That is the fundamental ethical question, and it's the one that critics always come back to. The argument is that even if your intentions are good, the mechanism itself is untransparent. If people aren't even consciously aware that they're being steered, can you really say they've given their consent?
The fear is that it becomes a tool for an illegitimate use of power.
Exactly. Especially if the goals of the choice architect, say, a corporation trying to maximize profit, aren't aligned with the long-term best interests of the individual.
And we see this in the commercial world with counter nudges.
All the time. Choice architecture is a neutral tool. It can be used for good or for ill. A counter nudge is when a company uses the same psychological principles to push you toward their preferred outcome, often directly undermining a public policy goal.
So the government nudges the cafeteria to put fruit at eye level.
And the fast food company next door runs a massive advertising campaign for its new, extra-large, high-margin combo meal, using anchoring and availability to make it seem like an irresistible deal. It's a kind of behavioral arms race.
Beyond the ethics, there are also serious questions from academics about the evidence itself. How solid is it, really?
This is a major concern, particularly around what's called publication bias.
What's that?
It's the phenomenon where scientific studies that show a positive result, that a nudge worked, are far more likely to get published in big journals than studies that show it didn't work or had a weak effect.
So we're only seeing the wins, not the failures.
We're disproportionately seeing the wins. And that can create a really distorted picture of how effective these interventions actually are on average. Some rigorous analyses have suggested that if you correct for this bias, the overall evidence for some types of nudges gets a lot weaker.
So what does that mean for a decision maker?
It means you have to be really cautious. You can't just take one successful study and assume it's going to work everywhere. It also means we need to demand much higher standards of transparency. We need to see the null results, the failures, because we learn just as much from them.
There's also a broader, more structural critique that by focusing on fixing individual flaws, nudging distracts us from bigger systemic problems.
This is a very powerful argument. Critics say that focusing on an individual's irrationality, telling someone to save more, for example, is a convenient way to avoid talking about the deeper reasons they can't save, like wage stagnation or predatory lending practices.
It's a politically safe solution that lets the system off the hook.
That's the critique, yes, that it can function as a Band-Aid that masks the need for more difficult structural surgery on the economy or society.
And this leads to an alternative idea championed by people like Gerd Gigerenzer. Instead of nudging people, why not teach them to defend themselves?
Right. This is the education alternative. The argument is that the role of a democratic government shouldn't be to perpetually steer its citizens like a flock of sheep. It should be to empower them.
By teaching them statistical thinking and risk literacy.
Exactly. Give them the cognitive tools to see when they're being manipulated, whether by a government or a corporation, and make their own rational choices. It's a debate about efficiency versus empowerment.
So after a decade of this, with all the successes and all the critiques, what are the key strategic lessons for a decision maker today?
I think we can boil it down to 4 main imperatives. First, make mandatory sludge audits a standard practice. You have to systematically hunt down and eliminate that administrative friction. It's not just about efficiency, it's about fairness.
Okay, number 2.
Balance behavioral policy with education. Don't just nudge. Also invest in programs that build risk literacy and empower people to make better decisions for themselves. That creates democratic legitimacy.
Number 3 is about embracing the future.
Absolutely. Adopt Nudge 2.0 principles. Move beyond the simple static defaults. Start using dynamic, personalized interventions, but, and this is a big but, you must commit to rigorous methodological transparency. That means publishing your failures too.
And finally, be a realist.
Be a realist. That's the 4th one. Anticipation and fortification. You have to assume that for every nudge you create, there will be a commercial counter nudge. And you have to be prepared to use harder policy levers, regulation, incentives, bans, when soft paternalism isn't enough. And understanding those counter behaviors requires the kind of sophisticated data analysis that is a core part of modern business intelligence and a key service of Twin Labs. When you step back and look at it all, the enduring legacy here is that trace architecture isn't a choice anymore. It's a permanent feature of how we organize society. Every choice has a frame. So the question for decision makers isn't whether to nudge, but how to do it ethically, transparently, and effectively. That means a constant fight against sludge and a move toward the sophisticated, data-driven world of Nudge 2.0.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to take away. We've just talked about the rising power of algorithmic nudging, where AI can personalize and deliver these interventions at scale, in real time, and often invisibly. Given everything we've said about the need for rigor and the problem of transparency, how do we make sure that the libertarian part of libertarian paternalism, that absolute freedom to easily opt out, remains real and accessible when the nudges themselves are becoming instantaneous and invisible?
Thank you for joining us today. Visit the Twin Labs website for more business insights.